As I look back now and remember in my mind's eye, the pictures are as clear as if they were yesterday. Yet sometimes it seems like 3 lifetimes have come and gone since those precious moments engraved their impressions within my soul, to be reflected in the creation of who I am today. I was 12 when the thought of being an artist really gave me an inspiration to draw. My mom always enjoyed reading True Love magazines. There were always 4 or 5 around the house. Her and my aunts would trade them back and forth as they finished each one. Of course, as a curious young boy, I would flip through them time and again. This one particular time, I noticed an ad. Draw the Pirate, art school offered. Wow, how cool. I knew I could do that, and the thought of going to art school really was exciting. So I reproduced those line drawing images to what I perceived to be almost perfect. I filled out the application and sent it in. It was a long 6 weeks before I got a reply, which now I suppose could have been one of those lifetimes I mentioned earlier. However long, the response was not what I had hoped for. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Shappy, although your work merits an art scholarship in our school, the age requirements state you must be 13 years old to qualify. Thank you for your entry. Please try again." Well, I was crushed. No, I never did enter again, but that valuable lesson followed me through many tough times in the last 50 years. It made me see no matter what happens around us, it doesn't change who we are inside if we don't want it to. I knew my drawings were good and didn't need their school to prove it. That's all that mattered. I was the oldest of 4 kids. My brother Dana is 3 years younger than me, my sister Dina is a year younger than him, and my sister Donna is a year younger than her. Being the oldest had both its advantages and disadvantages. I got to stay up later than them. I remember when my parents would have house parties and my dad and Mr. Stanley Contoys would play the piano and violin together, and everyone would dance to the honky-tonk music. I loved hearing my dad on that piano. He knew tons of songs. I would stand behind him and remember parts of the song, then sit down and play that part over and over until I had it memorized. Then I would study the next part by watching him play and learn the melody. I kept adding the parts together until I knew the whole song, and then play it every day to engrave it in my mind. I learned 4 of them that way. I'm 59 years old now and still love playing those songs I learned from my dad. I tried to encourage him at 85 years old to keep playing. He had recently bought a keyboard from the Contoys family and was getting back into it. He used to tell stories about when he was in the Navy and would play for hours at the bars the sailors hung out at. He said he never had to buy a drink for him or his buddies.
Good job, Dad.
They always had them lined up for them on the piano. This one's for you, Dad. One of the other things I learned over the years from my dad was how to shoot pool. He was very good at it, and I watched very closely. We both have won our share of tournaments and had lots of fun playing together. All through both junior high and high school, using my creativity was my favorite asset in woodworking, metal, and machine shop classes. Being top of my class in all of them was very rewarding and inspired me to elaborate on my creativity. That passion made me unique in everything I would do. You taught me that, Dad. Thanks. Always wanting to get the most out of even the simplest of projects. During that last year of high school, I did a lot of thinking about where I wanted to be in the next 20 years. I knew there was more out there than what Burlington, Vermont had to offer. I remember stories my dad had told about going around the world 3 times in the Navy and seeing all those exciting places. How cool would that be, to go in the Navy, to serve my country, get free schooling, and see exotic places, and retire at 37. So I enlisted in the 8-month delayed entry program, which meant By the time I left, I would have 8 months' time served already. Little did I know then how much of a blessing that was. I graduated in June of 1977 and was headed off to boot camp in July. Although Chicago was not the most picturesque place I had ever seen, it was the furthest I had ever been from Burlington, Vermont. Of course, that didn't really matter because the only thing I was going to see for the next 13 weeks was all confined in a military establishment. Well, let me tell you, after 2 weeks, I knew I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. When I mentioned earlier about 3 lifetimes, that was probably premature. Maybe we should leave that open and just add them up when all is said and done. The next 13 weeks was a lifetime in itself, but support and letters from my family and friends really helped me get through that time without breaking from the peer pressures inflicted upon our mind and bodies. One thing for sure, no matter what they said or did to me, it wasn't going to change how I felt about who I was inside. God knows they tried. The next 3 years would be a time when my expression through my art would be dark and mysterious. So many lonely days and nights would create pencil drawings that really had no story behind them, or at least that I can explain, only fear and uncertainty. I served my country as one of 2 machinists aboard the USS Mississippi CGN-40, a nuclear-powered guided missile cruiser. Being a brand new ship, we actually had very few machinery repair jobs. Most of the time in the shop was spent doing all the engraving for plaques and awards. Not exactly what I had worked so hard to learn as a machinist, but all that schooling would be beneficial later on in my life story. Being on an active Navy ship gave me an opportunity to see places in the world otherwise not reachable as a civilian. A few incredible stories come to mind as I think about people and events that took place during those voyages to foreign countries. Some of them were very interesting, such as San Juan and Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, Cartagena, Colombia, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the island of Curacao off the coast of Venezuela. Oh yeah, let's not forget the exciting Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Not. The place that really was the most special for me was St. Thomas and St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. It was their Mardi Gras festival while we were there in 1978. I always enjoyed putting a lot of creative effort into taking pictures of the people and places we visited. The timing didn't work out all that well for me then because I was scheduled for watch duty, which didn't give me an opportunity to be free to go ashore when I wanted to. I managed to trade with a buddy our watch times so I could take pictures of the festive events. I spent all that day working my way through the crowds, capturing the excitement of the native people in what seemed to be one of their happiest times. It was awesome to see all the bright costumes and energetic dancing going on everywhere you turned. I took what I believed to be 36 pictures, very carefully planned with an artistic eye. Well, when I returned to the ship late that evening and proceeded to rewind the film to remove it from the Canon AE-1 I had purchased from my cousin Kenny, only to find that it had never advanced throughout the whole day. Not one picture was ever really taken from reality to negatives. I was crushed. But no, I didn't give up. That next day, I made special arrangements to switch watch duties to recreate what I had done the day before. As you probably guessed, I double-checked the film to make sure all was ready. While I found myself climbing on rooftops, standing in the middle of the dancers in the streets, I got shots most could not imagine were possible. It was all so beautiful. The daylight faded and the partying continued until about 10 that night. I had gone through 2 rolls of film and headed back through this park on the edge of the village to reach the boat that would bring the sailors back to the ship docked in the harbor. Well, I bet you can't imagine what had happened when I returned to the ship and went to put my film away. I had lost the first roll I had put in the camera strap earlier that day. I could hardly believe it myself. Well, I jumped back on that boat to go back and look for this little black film container in the dark. Seemed ridiculous at the time, but I crawled on my hands and knees and backtracked my path I had taken through this park. God must have been looking out for me that night, as always, because about an hour later, and 200 feet or so from where I started, I found that little black container with a gray top in the grass in the dark. Those were some of the most beautiful pictures I ever took in that whole 3 years, and they were certainly those most appreciated. Goes to show you that if you believe, anything is possible. There are a couple of guys I met in the Navy that became good friends. One evening I was out about on my 1976 Honda 554 Super Sport cruising in Norfolk when I got a flat tire. It happened to be close to this tiny local bar near the ocean. As I approached the entrance, I met this guy coming out carrying a motorcycle helmet heading to his bike. His name was Brian McGregor. I asked him if he had a spare tube or patch kit. His reply was, "No, but I have a doobie to share, and we could take my bike to get your tire fixed." As we talked more, we realized we were both from Vermont, and he lived in Williston, which is only 10 minutes from my hometown of Burlington. How cool was that? We ended up spending a lot of time out together partying. He saw me off the day I packed up my 1965 Ford van with my bike and other belongings in the back to head out of Norfolk for the last time. That trip was another story in itself. It's been almost 45 years now since we met. I've seen him a couple times in the past couple decades, but I'm not really sure where he is at or what he's up to these days. It's unfortunate how people lose touch with each other over time. Another guy that became a friend was Mike Caggio. He actually was placed on our ship to replace me when I left. He was from Richmond, Vermont, which is the next town over from Williston, where Brian was from. That was so wild because we attended the same schools for machining in San Diego. I had less than a year left when he came aboard. It seems to make things more comfortable when you can share things about your hometown that are familiar to others around you. We hunted in some of the same areas and knew some of the same people. After Mike's tour in the Navy, he continued sailing in the Merchant Marines. I was at his wedding when he married his wife Carol. We have kept in touch some over the years. He is an officer now, still in the Merchant Marines. He goes out for 3 months and then comes home for 3 months. As long as he is happy, that's what's important. Here we are together on his boat out on Lake Champlain, 27 years later, both in good form for 45 years old. Here's another guy I met, Henry Davis Jr. He was the only other machinist aboard our ship. He was the head of our division. He seemed to be a very caring and understanding family man. I had a few times over the 6 years in the Navy that their way and my way conflicted. Henry stood behind me like a father figure and helped me deal with it all without causing too much conflict. See, the Navy doesn't appreciate it when you speak your mind, and that I certainly did. Thank God for that 8-month delayed entry program, because living 2 years and 4 months of military life aboard a Navy ship was plenty long enough for me. As I walked down that long dock away from the ship for the last time in Norfolk, Virginia, I could hardly believe it was happening. In fact, until I actually left the base, I was so sure they were going to pull me back and give me one more haircut just to get one last thing over on me. I wore a wool cap for a month and a half on my head to hide my longer than regulation hair, just to feel somewhat natural when I became a civilian again. I counted down those last 100 days. It seemed like another lifetime, too. One of the many in my story. After my tour of duty for my country, I soon was employed by General Electric Company, doing machining work on one of our government's defense programs, making parts for the Vulcan gun for aircraft. At that time in my life, my art took a break as far as drawing goes. My creativity took a very unique turn. It started one Wednesday night when I was cruising around town with my friend Rick Plouffe. He mentioned something about stopping in this local bar called Vinny's Hot Spot to see his friend Debbie for a moment. I had never been in there before and had no idea how that visit was going to change my life. We walked into this place and there was standing room only. There must have been 150 ladies being wild and rowdy. I asked Rick, what the hell are they all worked up about? As we got closer to the dance floor, I could see this guy out there with just his bikini underwear on, strutting his stuff, and the ladies were loving it. Rick said, "Robert, they just started having male dancers a couple weeks ago." Never before had there been a place in Vermont that allowed this. Ladies would always go across the border to Canada to see male dancers. We watched for a few minutes, and I didn't think his dancing was very creative, and I said to Rick, "They get paid to do that? I could do better than that." Well, I no more than spit those words out, and I heard Rick holler to his friend, Debbie, "Come here!" All of a sudden, this cute, sexy little thing was standing in front of me with just a skimpy white outfit that left little to the imagination. The next thing I knew, Rick was telling her how I had said I could dance better than those guys and couldn't believe that they got paid for it. So she grabs the front of my pants and takes a peek in and says, "Really? What you got on for underwear? You're next." Well, my mouth dropped open, and I said, "Wait a minute." Before I could respond, she had me by the hand and dragged me in the back room to prepare for my big entrance. I always stood behind my word, and I had put my foot in my mouth that time. I picked a couple of songs that were full of energy to get those ladies going. The first was "Working for the Weekend," and the second was "Girls Just Want to Have Fun." She introduced me as Animal, which was my nickname at the roller skating rink because of my wild and crazy dancing on wheels and because I had a full head of curly hair that was below my shoulders. When I entered that crowd of wild women, they screamed with excitement. I put on a show like no other that Wednesday night in July of 1980. From then on, I was the main attraction for the next 18 months. I was working graveyard shift at General Electric from 7 to 10 p.m. I would entertain anywhere from 50 to 150 ladies, then dance with them all to the band from 10 to 11 p.m., then be at my job at 11:30 to do machining work until 7:30 a.m. What an exhilarating night. There were many interesting pictures taken during that adventure in my creative journey. Debbie really made a big deal and surprised me with a cake on my 23rd birthday. Eventually, Vinny's Hot Spot was sold to someone who had other plans for that location. I continued to dance for many private parties in homes and businesses. My love and respect for Debbie Miner will live on forever. She was a beautiful lady with a big heart. Although she is no longer in this physical world with us, she is always present in spirit. Thank you, sweetheart, for sharing what you love so much with me. It's been almost 40 years now since that night in Vinny's when she said, "You're next." But the image of her face and the energy and spirit in her smile are in my memory as clear as if it were yesterday. One of those special moments that never fade with time. The movie Flashdance reflects in my mind the kind of energy she shared in her life. I thank Judy for taking the pictures that she did all those times she accompanied me. Back then, usually on Friday and Saturday night, I would spend a couple of hours being wild on 8 wheels at the roller rink. Those energetic activities help keep this body in its finely toned shape. Always on the go, swimming, jogging, dancing, hiking, roller skating, hard work, play hard, always young at heart. There were many times we would skate Friday, Saturday, and Monday nights all in the same week. There was a regular group of us that loved to shuffle together out on that hardwood floor. With all the long curly hair and the wild push-to-the-limit dancing I did on those wheels, I guess the nickname Animal was appropriate. Those rinks are just history now, fading away with time. Just memories of when we were young and full of energy. I'm one of the few that still get into the tunes on 8 wheels. And still after all these years have passed, there are so many who know and refer to me as Animal from the roller rink. Judy and I seem to have a special chemistry between us. The first time I went home with her, I met her little boy Ben. He was a little over a year old then. Being the playful big kid at heart type that I am, children have always related and bonded with me quickly. Ben was no exception. We hit it off wonderfully from the start of what would be 9 of the most special years of my life. I was working third shift at General Electric as a machinist still when we met. My apartment was only a couple of blocks from the plant. That made it convenient to go home for lunch whenever I chose to. It was a small 2-bedroom upstairs apartment. Eventually Judy and Ben moved in with me and we were a cute little family. I made good use of that Canon AE1 those next few years. Everywhere we went, I would prop Ben up to create an awesome memory for us to reflect back on later. Judy was not very adventurous, so Ben and I did a lot of things without her. He and I also rode my motorcycle to many of the interesting places we explored. One of our favorites was the Huntington Gorge. We spent many hours at a time swimming and playing there. The ride to it was fun also because the road was hills and curves and lots of fields and woods lining both sides. Often we would see white-tailed deer feeding at the edge of the tree line. I would always strap Ben to the backrest of the 1100 Yamaha I had. He seemed to love the attention he would get from other motorists as we were stopped for lights or intersections. At times he was so relaxed back there he would fall asleep. Although you would never know it because he was strapped sitting straight up and still holding on to the sidebars. He had a helmet and sunglasses on so you couldn't see his eyes anyways. It was so funny to see people waving to him not knowing he was sound asleep. This is one of my favorite pictures. I dressed him in my helmet and leather coat and gloves and let him pretend to drive for a moment. We thank God for many blessings in our lives, but one that meant the most to me was the day Ben and I were going to spend the day at the gorge, but his grandmother, Betty, wanted to take him with her for the afternoon. I went alone that beautiful Saturday in July of 1985. Early evening on my way home, the unexpected happened, and I was the victim of a terrible situation that caused a head-on crash with me, my bike, and a truck. Thank God I was alone. A passenger on the motorcycle would never have survived. The only thing that saved me were my quick reflexes and the strength of the muscles in my body. If ever I had doubts about miracles happening, that was one of the many times that proved to me there are angels who look out for us all. Sometimes we don't always know why things happen the way they do, but later we understand the importance of timing and how much it meant in our lives to get us where we are today. Another one of the special things we enjoyed was to go flying with my dad. He had always wanted to learn, but waited until he was 50 to actually do it. These 2 pictures are from one of those flights. After working third shift at General Electric for almost 2 years, my interest in machining dwindled. I soon found a position managing a woodshop warehouse. Back in school, working with wood was one of the fun things for me. This particular job gave me access to tools and materials I could be creative with. My mom had showed me this lunch bag she liked that had Garfield the cat sitting on a chair with a fork in one hand and the spoon in the other. The little caption said, "Did someone say lunch?" I took that picture and drew it on a piece of select pine. I cut it into a 10-inch round diameter, then wood burnt the design in the face of it, then created a clock around the artwork. One of the local bars' name was Garfield's Tavern. I brought it in one evening and showed the manager and told him it would look great on the wall behind the bar. He loved the idea. I told him I would deliver it in a couple of days. Within 3 days, I had taken orders for custom clocks in 3 other establishments, using Garfield as an example. Little did I know then how popular they would become. In all, I created almost 200 custom wood-burnt and hand-painted clocks of homes and businesses. They became very elaborate. I cut them to shape, glued beads where lights would be, and many other 3-dimensional features. At that time, I hadn't even started using the airbrush as one of my tools of choice. Of course, I photographed each piece that was created. Here are some of my favorites that I would like to share with you, including the one that started it all, Garfield. Ironically, that's how I met my now ex-wife, Lorraine. which I owe a great deal of thanks for her hard work and support during the 6 years we had our gallery together. The memory is very clear to me even now. It was Saturday night, and I was on my way home from my parents' house. We had all met for supper and to play cards for a while, as we did quite often. I had not had the best of luck, as I often didn't, and decided to head home. En route, I was going by this place called Alibi's Pub in Colchester, Vermont. The parking seemed very busy, so I decided to take the clock I had recently finished and go in to show it off and visit with friends and whoever I might run into. I hung out for about an hour, then noticed this lovely lady at the bar watching me intently. She seemed to be motioning for me to approach her with what I had in my hands. As I always did, I indulged in sharing with her all the details of how I had created that one-of-a-kind timepiece. Before I knew it, she was writing me a check for the deposit on a family tree clock for her parents' anniversary. Well, it was getting pretty late, and I told Lorraine I had to be going. She asked if she could join me, but I was not really up for company. She insisted on spending the night with me. It had been a while since my last relationship of any kind, and I guess I was a little vulnerable, so I agreed to have her follow me home. The rest is history. 6 months later, we were getting married and started our business together. Or I should say, I continued my business and made her a partner. She worked very hard for those 6 years, keeping everything in order. God knows I'm not the most organized artist in the world. We did all the local fairs and craft shows and car shows and bike shows, etc. My art won many awards and got lots of recognition throughout the East Coast and parts of Canada. So many of the pieces we took orders for had very sentimental meanings to their clients. The biggest reward to all our hard work was seeing the faces with smiles and many times tears of joy when they received something that was created from the heart of a very passionate artist, made just for them or one of their loved ones. For me, each and every piece was special, whether it be a $20 t-shirt or a $300 portrait. They all had my signature on them. I took a lot of pride in creating a masterpiece each time. Lorraine used to tell me that I could have stopped 2 hours earlier and the customer would have still been happy. And she was right, but I needed to be happy with them. They say sometimes we are our worst critic. Of course, the family members always wanted me to create for them also. Here are a couple of those special requests. Lorraine had a few special requests of her own every now and then. And once in a great while, I would even be able to create something special for me. The one that touches my heart the most is a very special, beautiful story that was created because of a very sad tragedy. Mary Beth and her husband Tony were one of our regular clients. I had done matching reversible jackets for them and t-shirts when they got married. They were always a very high-spirited couple, and it was always a pleasure to see them together. One evening they came into our gallery with very sad faces. They had in their hands pictures of their daughter, Alicia. I had already headed west and was in Vegas at the time. Lorraine had them call me. When they told me why they desired our help, my heart sank in my chest. Their lovely 11-year-old daughter, Alicia, had been crushed by a bookcase in her school and had died from the injuries. Mary Beth had written a beautiful story reflecting the thoughts and dreams she had shared with her daughter. She wanted me to put them into art on this very special car she dedicated to Alicia. It meant so much to me to know she trusted in my creativity and imagination to be able to reflect her stories in art form. I planned a special trip home to fulfill her request. We studied photos she had picked out and reviewed her beautiful stories together, and she knew our thoughts and visions of what she had written were the same. I felt the presence of her daughter as I created her special world upon this mobile story. Many of the days as I worked, Mary Beth and Tony would come by to see this masterpiece in process come alive. I took a lot of photos, and they videotaped portions of the work also. It took 2 weeks of 10 to 12-hour days to complete this very special little girl's dream car. The vibrant colors and motion of life reflects how this little girl touched so many lives with her smile and laughter. I'm blessed to have known her and to have helped her to live on through my art. Alicia is always and forever in our hearts with love. It's really cool that all her friends have wanted to ride in and share the spirit of Alicia with her mom through this car. As I sit and write this, I realize that this year she would have been old enough to drive, and I'm sure she is loving her new car in heaven. There are special stories behind the portraits and other people and animals that I will share with you a little further on in my life story that are reflected through my art. As a kid, I only had 2 dogs, Shelby and Sheba, but many cats throughout the years. When I met Lorraine, she had a wonderful dog named Dylan. He was a Doberman Rottweiler mix, and I truly believe he was part beaver and retriever, because he seemed to live to chew and fetch, and that's all he cared about. It didn't matter if it was a toothpick or a log or a ball or a rock. He would chew and retrieve it as many times as someone would throw it. Everybody that came into the gallery absolutely loved him. He would encourage all of them to indulge in his game of fetch. We couldn't have asked for a better mascot. He was so gentle with the kids also. Many times on special occasions, I would surprise Lorraine with a portrait of him. She deserved each one too, because of all the hard work she put into our business on a daily basis. Here are a couple pictures reflecting Dylan's character. He has since passed on to the big fetching grounds in the sky, but his presence is always felt in our hearts, and even up to the day he passed on, his stare was fixed on his ball, ready to fetch one more time. He also had passion for what he truly loved. It's really a great feeling to look back and see art you have created that has stood the test of time and weather in an ever-changing world we live in. Then there are the ones that didn't make it. In Burlington, Vermont, where I grew up and spent most of my life, the intersection of Main and Church Street had seen many different businesses come and go. I met this couple on the coming in of their Texas barbecue restaurant. They had some great ideas about putting a theme to their new establishment, Western of course. I brainstormed for them to paint a whole wagon train using the kitchen window as the chuck wagon. They absolutely loved the idea, but their budget could not really afford the extra special featured mural. Because of the location and all the exposure the art would receive, I gave them a special deal and created this masterpiece. Guess what? Within 6 months, their lack of good management forced them to close down the business. 4 weeks later, a pizzeria moved in, and guess what? A Western mural didn't fit their theme, so they painted over the whole thing. That's heartbreaking for an artist. Thank God I took a few pictures. So much for the 10 long days I spent tediously creating every little detail of a Western civilization on wheels. To any other artist who may be reading my story, I learned a valuable lesson then that I will share with you now. Always, whenever possible, create your masterpieces on canvas or other removable material and attach them to the walls. Most walls are not removable, but very paint-overable. It's funny that so many of our clients would come back to us and say that the person they had the shirt, jacket, or clothing painted for would not wear them because they didn't want to take the chance on ruining them or putting them through the wash. We ended up framing many shirts so they could hang them on the wall instead. J.P. Peranto was one of our special repeat clients that became a close friend. His Honda motorcycle was the first bike I did a complete vehicle mural on. We had some great deals for both of us. During the winter months, we would put the bike in our gallery on display. There were many special pieces of art that I created for him over the years. The one that meant the most to him and me was his 1985 Olds Cutlass Supreme. He had a friend put an aqua-based paint on it that looked like a deep ocean color. We brainstormed for a week and a half before the total idea was created. I spent 180 hours making those ideas come to life, covering every inch of that car. We removed the hood and trunk to paint them in my gallery. I even let him paint a few hairlines on the second hood that had 16 wolves hidden in the scene. When it came to the sides, we set the car up outside the gallery on the street. It was done on a weekend of one of the most busiest intersections in the city. We turned a lot of heads, and many people walking by on the sidewalk stopped to observe the masterpiece in process. We videotaped a lot of it and took many in-process pictures. Its creative and interesting theme helped it to win a few trophies in local fairs and car shows. After a year or so, we took the hood and revised it in a very unique way. I took the 3 Black Panthers and cut out the eyes. Then I mounted lights on the inside underneath the plexiglass ones I had formed. When you turned on the parking lights, all 6 of the eyes lit up red. The rest of the car had blue neon lights under the sides and in the wheel wells. It was a spectacular sight to see. Each winter when the car was put away, we hung the hood on display in the gallery with the eyes lit up. It drew many customers off the street to observe its awesome effect. In the summer of 1998, I decided to head out west, destination Las Vegas. JP was no longer using the Oldsmobile and offered for me to purchase it to accompany my adventure across the western frontier. The day before I was ready to go, I decided to take him up on his offer. But that part of my story will be told in detail later. There are so many special things I'd like to share about the 6 years before in the Gallery of Artistic Impressions on the corner of Pine and Maple Street in Burlington, Vermont. Another vehicle that drew some attention was Pizzagalli's dragster. The tires not only lit up the track, so did this flaming paint job I created for Peter, the owner. Burlington's classic rock channel 101.3 visited our display while we were at the fair and absolutely loved my work. They commissioned me to create 15 album covers on their Champ van. Every inch of this vehicle blended together with a musical space scene. They proudly showed it off at all their remote promotional events, and also they lent it to us often. 2 blocks from us was a local youth center. Many of the kids in the neighborhood loved to come in the gallery and hang out and go through the pictures in our portfolios. Many of them couldn't afford to buy a custom t-shirt. Not that they were so expensive, they just had little or no money. We decided to do something very special 2 years in a row just before Christmas. We invited the youth center to bring all the kids over to the gallery in groups of 10 to 12, and I hand-painted shirts for all of them. We asked what kind of things they liked and related the shirts to their interest. Altogether, we ended up creating 75 shirts for those much appreciated kids. The smiles on their faces were so awesome to see when they would come back to the gallery proudly wearing my art. It was so gratifying to us that we volunteered to paint a mural for all to observe on New Year's Eve in the event called First Night that took place all through downtown each year. That first year, I created a dinosaur mural. Over 3,000 people passed by and observed its making within the 8-hour period we were there. It went over so big with great response, they invited me back the next 2 years to entertain the participants and gave us a prime spot to allow the most people to watch the art come to life. The second year, I created an endangered species mural, and the third year was a Looney Tunes mural. The kids asked hundreds of questions as they watched. It was a learning experience for all of us. Lakeside Pharmacy mural also drew quite an interest in an usually boring parking lot. It spanned 40 feet across and 15 feet high. It was a view of Lake Champlain looking out across the Adirondack Mountains. Working against the elements outside in Vermont is a unique challenge, especially on Lake Champlain. In the fall of 1995, I met Joe Kelly. His girlfriend was excited about having me create something in the bottom of their swimming pool, giving me free artistic license to go wild, but of course with a limited budget. I started this incredible journey through a new experience, epoxy paint and Mother Nature. And let me tell you, Mother Nature must have been on her period that 9 days, because the wind blew, it poured rain for 8 hours straight, and she blew leaves and general outdoor debris everywhere. Being that it was fall in Vermont, the temperature was about 50 degrees. I had to tarp over the pool and work inside it while running a kerosene heater for the whole time. In the end, as usual, the finished mural was awesome. 9 years later, and it's still holding up well. Since then, a few pool murals have been painted with much less turmoil. Then there was the Miller project. Mr. Bobby Miller was an avid car collector. He had acquired a 1931 Studebaker from out of state and had it trucked to Vermont to rebuild it to running condition and enter it in the Great American Race from Ottawa, Canada to New Mexico. They spent weeks restoring that relic until it looked almost new. He bought a 28-foot trailer and a new Suburban to pull it to the annual race. One afternoon, Mr. Miller came into our gallery and requested that I paint portraits of the vehicle on all 3 sides of this new trailer. It was a project that would mark the start of a very difficult few months in my artistic career. It was Tuesday when I started the job, and it had to be completed by a week from that Friday. By Friday, I had finished the back and half of one side. It had been a couple weeks since I had gone roller skating, so I decided to take a break and catch the last hour and a half at the rink. I rushed to prepare for the very creative, energetic time I usually spend on those 8 wheels. Unfortunately, I neglected to snug up the laces as well as I should have and stretch my leg muscles as I always did. Well, about 20 minutes into my wild dancing on those wheels, I came out of a backspin and twisted my ankle of my right foot. It happened so quick as I fell to the floor, but as I always had, I bounced up and continued to proceed forward, only to find I had no control and went crashing to the floor again. I wasn't really sure what had happened at the moment, but I knew it was different from any other time I had fallen in all the years of roller skating. Within a couple of minutes, the pain in my ankle was so drastic, I knew I wasn't going to walk off the floor on both feet. I had driven to the rink by myself and didn't think I could handle driving myself to the hospital on my own, so I called Lorraine and she picked me up. After x-rays were taken, I was told that there were 3 breaks in the bones in my right leg. That next morning, I was in surgery and they put 4 screws in the sides of my foot and put a cast on that would hold the bone straight for the next 12 weeks. Monday morning, I sat in Mr. Miller's office with him wondering how I was going to have his art ready by Friday. I said, no matter what it takes, the job will be done without compromise. I rented a power lift with a remote control and maneuvered around on it the best I could and completed the project that Thursday evening about midnight. Thanks to the lift and the Percocet they gave me for the pain. He was so pleased he gave me a $500 bonus and said that in all the years of being a developer, he didn't know anyone that would have finished the job with such precision and detail on time under those conditions. This photo reflects his happiness and amazement of a job well done. Although I don't look like a happy camper in a cast and crutches. It again showed me that determination and passion in what you do will get you through anything. There were supposed to be 3 phases of those casts to support my injuries. Every night I would take it off and move my foot the best I could with the pain and the healing process. When I went in for the first 4-week checkup, supposedly to get a second cast, the doctor was amazed and said he couldn't believe how it had bonded so quickly. He didn't want to put another cast on, instead said for me to start walking on it and get rid of the crutches as soon as possible. 2 days later, I was hobbling along without external help. Miracles do happen. It took me almost 8 months before I felt sure enough to go to the rink again. That night when I did return, I thought how I might pace myself so not to re-break anything, but within 20 minutes or so, I was getting into the tunes like nothing had ever happened. My ankle seems to swell up some if I overwork it, but overall, I guess it will hold up for another 40 years. I'm not sure whatever happened to Mr. Miller's trailer, but it would be cool if the art was still on it and being appreciated. Chuck was one of the many big NASCAR fans we met while in the gallery. His plate on his truck said racing. One of his favorite drivers was Davey Allison, who had died in a racing-related accident. He came to me requesting I paint the H rocket with a portrait of Davey Allison as a spirit image next to it. He said if the truck ever died, he would hang the tailgate on the wall in his den to commemorate the late racing legend. Ron Stewart was a friend of Lorraine's before her and I met. He would take Dylan when we went out of town on occasion. He was thrilled to have me paint this cool wolf and eagle design on the back of his leather coat. This is a mural I created in my cousin Bruce's living room that measured 8 feet high and 12 foot long. Within the 6 years we operated our gallery, there were many artists that I helped to inspire with their creativity by sharing my work and dreams with them. One of which was more special than the others. His name is Jesse Frazier. We met him and his parents at the Champlain Valley Fair while we were exhibiting my art in what they called the Modern Living Building. For 6 years straight, we would set up a 10-foot by 20-foot gallery using almost every medium I painted on, everything from leather coats, motorcycles, jet skis, guitars, car hoods, and many different sized canvases. That particular fair lasted 10, 12-hour days. Thousands of people would observe and respond in many different ways to what we had to share with them. Jesse was a 9-year-old boy then that was very interested in art and had dreams of someday doing it for a living. He had spent a few hours standing behind me watching me create custom t-shirts and license plates for fair customers. His parents saw his interest in the airbrush and asked if I gave lessons. Well, as of that point, I had not, but agreed to give him a 10-hour course of basic art and airbrush techniques. He was so excited. Jesse picked up some of the techniques rather quickly, which made it fun for him. When you enjoy what you do, it helps you to learn. Within a couple of days, he was creating his own t-shirts for his brother and friends. His mom, Candy, commissioned me to paint a mural on his bedroom wall to inspire him to practice on a regular basis. They also bought another one of my murals for his brother's room at Christmas time. That season, Jesse had made gifts for his whole family to cherish always. The local schools offered very little in the art department related to airbrushing. Lots of kids would have done really well if they were taught at an early age to use their creative talents with other than conventional art tools. It's my favorite tool to use because of its versatility. The few times in the past before I started airbrushing, I had asked questions to other artists and they never seemed to want to share anything. Like they were so afraid someone else was going to learn some big secret and take all their business from them. Knowing how I felt when they seemed so cold and sometimes rude, I always have done just the opposite and been very open and generous with my knowledge over the years. Our gallery was on a busy intersection. Every time I would finish a piece of art that was not going to be picked up right away by the customer, we would display it in the window. People driving by seemed to be very interested in seeing what was new from day to day. Of course, on holidays, the display would be to the theme of the occasion. Often I would put our jet ski Champ outside in the front of the gallery, which turned a lot of heads all day long. Even after 2 years from selling it, we would have clients that had seen its photos respond by recalling seeing it out on the lake or on the river scarily zooming along. It took 28 hours to complete the creation of that first watercraft I painted. One afternoon I had taken it out on the lake for the first time and hit the throttle to take off, and within 20 seconds it blew up and sank. Thank God I hadn't stood up already and lifted the steering bar off the body, because that bar is what kept it from blowing up in my face rather than out the sides. Luckily the water was only 3 foot deep. We often forget how vulnerable life is sometimes. When there is a special purpose for us, which there is for each and every one of us, even the most drastic mishaps or obstacles won't keep us from fulfilling that purpose. My Uncle Giles was very special to me. We lived next door to each other for the first 17 years of my life. We always seemed to have a special bond, especially when we shared the hunting season together. Our camp was in the mountains in Northfield, Vermont. Each November, he would spend a whole week up there. Most of the time, the rest of us would come up and hunt the elusive white-tailed deer on the weekends. There were a few times I was able to go up during the week and spend time walking and hunting the woods with him. For a long time, he never took an interest in archery season, but the last couple of years, he had talked about buying a bow and spending the time up to camp since he had retired from his work as a truck driver. It was the summer of 1995 when he had told me he had purchased a nice compound bow and was going to do some practicing to be ready to hunt the following season. God's purpose for him came sooner than that next season. One early evening in August, he kissed my Aunt Pauline goodnight and rolled over in bed and died beside her. My cousins that lived close were called over to help, but he was gone. My heart sank in my chest when my mom called to share the sad news of his passing. When bow season came around, I swore to get a deer for Uncle Giles. Never before in all the years I spent in the woods had I ever bagged one during archery season. It was the last Thursday morning of the 3-week period they allowed, and I sat quietly in the tree stand I had built in between two fields that bordered the bottom of the small ledges in the area in Colchester, Vermont. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of a man walking the edge of the field. He looked very familiar. As he got closer, I could clearly see it was my Uncle Giles, and he was not wearing clothes suitable for the woods, but he had on the green plaid shirt he had always wore inside the camp. I don't think I took a breath that whole 3 to 4 minutes as I watched in disbelief of what my eyes were seeing. For a moment, just a brief moment, he disappeared into the near woods, heading in my direction. Within less than a half a minute, a figure appeared moving through the bushes. I was shocked. It wasn't him, but a white-tailed buck. In that quick instant, I reached around to get my bow and swung it back to a shooting stance. That deer took several leaps and then stopped broadside and looked right up at me, as if waiting for me to release the arrow. It all happened so quickly, yet in slow motion. That moment of impact when the arrow struck the deer, it released an energy of triumph. It leaped high and strong, like I had never seen before, and disappeared through the woods. Within minutes I was down from my tree stand and tracing its leaps and bounds. About 50 yards from where we had united lay its peaceful body, almost as if to have a smile of content on its face. That moment was overwhelming, but I immediately scouted the surrounding area to find the possibility of a hunter that may have flushed this deer from its hiding place, but there was none. Not a soul within sight or sound of us both. I stood over that deer that Thursday morning, and the tears poured down my face, for I realized that my uncle's desire to fill his passion, and with the love inside of me for him, and the promise I had made, allowed us to be that moment in time together. For he became that deer's body and soul, and together we shared the spirit of the woods forever. God bless you, Uncle Giles. A few years have passed since then. There have been times I've sat quietly in the woods, and I can hear his voice, and see the smile on his face that reflected the many times he had returned to the camp triumphant. To take and leave everything familiar, friends, family, and surroundings behind, and head off to an unknown world is something most people never experience. But it's the summer of 1998, and the Oldsmobile is packed up with clothes and art materials, and I'm starting my journey west to discover a new frontier, the world outside of Burlington, Vermont. Although my family hated to see me leave, they knew that my dream awaited me in a faraway land, and I must follow my heart to make them come true. If your dreams are big enough and determination persists, all obstacles can be maneuvered around. One obstacle that would prove to be a challenge was the fact that the air conditioning didn't work in the Oldsmobile. Thank God it had tinted windows, or I would have fried out there on the highway. Back then, I didn't have a cell phone either, so it was a little stressful being so far from anywheres, especially crossing the Plain States. Texas seemed like I was the only one on Earth. That was nearer to the end of my journey. One of my first major stops was in New York. There was a little convenience store with a payphone at the bottom of a parking lot. I had parked right in front of it and had got out to make a call when all of a sudden this truck up near the gas pumps starts rolling down the parking lot right towards my car. Then I noticed there was a little kid in the truck behind the wheel. My heart stopped for a moment. I ran to the side of the truck and the door was locked, so I jumped in front of it to try to hold it back from crashing into the side of my car. It seemed like forever, another lifetime, as I strained with all my might to keep it from reaching an impact. Remember, this Oldsmobile has over $5,000 worth of artwork around it, and I spent 180 hours creating that art. The man that owned the truck finally came running out and got inside to stop this beast from disaster. I confronted him about leaving the boy in there by himself, but he really didn't seem to care much. At the time, I was concerned about my car, but after the fact, thinking about the circumstances, I probably saved the little boy's life by being in the right place at the right time. I was his angel that day. If I had not been there, the truck would have crossed the road into speeding traffic. After that, I stopped off in Rochester to meet some friends that were always like family to me. We met when I was only 10 because they were related to Charlie Hour. He owned a boathouse on the lake where we lived. As kids, we spent lots of time over there hanging out. I had a crush on Cindy Mans, and when I went in the Navy in 1997, they drove to meet me at Niagara Falls before I headed off to boot camp. That was very special because they drove 10 hours to see me before I left. That was 40-something years ago. Cindy is married and has 4 beautiful children now. Sometimes we think back and wonder what might have been if. I guess we all can look back and wonder if the choices we made had been different, how and where our lives would be now. So now I'm on the road searching my soul for my destiny. Friends in Vermont that go to Vegas every winter had seen the swimming pool I had painted and said they knew someone who owned one of the casinos there. They suggested maybe that's where I should go because everyone has pools that could be painted. When I was in San Diego for schooling for the Navy, I absolutely loved it. I always thought California was a place for me. Ocean beaches, roller skating outside in the sun with all the babes. But Las Vegas sounded interesting, so Vegas, here I come. Packing all I could fit of art supplies and clothes and less than $1,000 in my pocket, I headed west. My whole left side of my arm and face were sunburnt by the time I spent 4.5 days driving across country. When I came across the Nevada line, it was almost 1 a.m. on a Friday morning. I could see an orange glow in the sky, like the sun was setting over the horizon. But it was the lights of the city illuminating in the air. Coming down through the mountains to reach the Boulder Dam was incredible, like nothing I had ever seen before. The pictures I took didn't come out so well, but trust me, it was spectacular. I've been across it a few times since then, but nothing compares to the first time. At almost 2 a.m., I was driving into the city of Vegas for the first time with 5 lanes of traffic all around my painted-up Oldsmobile. I was paranoid as heck. Those people were crazy. The first stop was a little motel called the Laughing Jackalope on the south end of the strip. It was cheap and I was beat, so I checked in for a couple of days. The lady at the front desk was so sweet to share some tips about how to get around the city. Seeing it from a higher altitude, it seemed so huge, but after a couple of weeks, I had it all mapped out in my head. I covered a lot of ground the first couple of days, showing off the portfolio of my work, and the car drew a lot of attention. Within that first week, I contracted my first job at the Beach nightclub on Paradise Road. The place had lots of tacky art all over inside, but there was one area that had potential for a nice mural to go along with the beach theme. Mike, the maintenance man, was very helpful in the preparation of the job. I spent almost 6 full days creating what would be their best part of the whole bar. That was 1998. It's been many years now and it's still there, complementing the place. Mike was so impressed with my work, he had me create a mural on his Harley of him riding his bike on a mountain road in the moonlight on the front and a wolf and eagle on the sides of the tank. He entered it in one of the bike shows and won first place trophy. Very cool. Mary at the Laughing Jackalope knew I was looking for a place to live, so she pointed out an ad for a roommate to live with this couple in their condo. I set up an appointment to go meet this lady, Carol. Within 20 minutes, she said, "Robert, if you want the room, it's yours. I like who you are and trust your character." So that next week, I had a place to call home for a moment, so I set up my own phone line for my business. Carol and Chuck were nice people, but had a lot of issues to work out between them. I was there 2 months, and it was kind of stressful because they argued all the time. In my travels, I had met this guy that sold Oriental furniture. He had contracted me to do a mural in his living room. One day the conversation came up about where I was living, so I shared my situation with him. He mentioned he knew this guy that owned a large mansion off the Mount Charleston Road and that no one was in it but the animal keeper and a chimp named Tarzan. That became my friend. Sounded great, so I asked him to give this guy a call. He calls this guy Greg and says, "I've got this incredible artist doing some work in my house and he needs a place to stay." Greg says, "Really? Great. I've been looking for an artist. Have him move out to the ranch." By the end of the month, I went from one room of my own in a little condo to a 13,000 square foot mansion to use as I like. How cool is that? And of course, Tarzan and I became good friends. He loved following me around in the gym and playing. I didn't get too friendly with the lion and tiger, but I did get my pictures taken with them both. The ranch was built by 2 guys in the 70s that obviously did a lot of pot and Jack Daniels. The architecture was wild. I stayed in the master bedroom that was 1,300 square feet itself. Plenty of room for me to do my artwork out of. It was almost 2 weeks before Greg came out there and we met. He really loved my work and expressed an interest in creating at the ranch. I came up with a really cool idea to give the master bedroom character. Half the house is actually underground, which makes it seem like a secluded place in the back rooms. As you can see, I changed all that and opened it up to the outdoors. One of Greg's interests was boxing. He had plans to make it a training facility for all the high-end boxers to rent while they were in town. The 3,000 square foot garage was going to be a full-size gym, including a boxing ring. I helped create a logo and paint it on the wall in the gym and also on the boxing ring floor when it was constructed. Marissa Shaw was a 4-time world champion. Her husband Marcel was her manager. We became close friends. This is a portrait I gave to Greg when Laura Serrano moved out to the ranch to train. Greg's son Vincent was only a little over a year old when we met, but what a smart kid. For his 2nd birthday, I painted Winnie the Pooh on a little rocking chair for him and wood burn his name in the back. At each end of this incredible house, there are towers that are like lookout posts. To me, it seemed like you were in a treehouse, so that's exactly what I created. They had installed a spiral staircase that went from the bedroom below into this loft, as they called it then. I enclosed that staircase to make it into an old oak tree. So now you pass through the center of this tree to get into the treehouse. Using real bark and tons of creativity, I constructed branches, birds' nests, moving waterfalls with outdoor sounds and rushing water, and birds and bugs singing, butterflies fluttering, and hummingbirds humming. Hey look, now I'm a poet. It's really hard to appreciate the feeling you get while in this special room from these pictures. But that's the case in most of the pictures. They just don't do the best of justice. One thing for sure, the treehouse is the most talked about room in this 13,000 square foot home. Being around the world of boxing, I thought to create some special portraits of past and present fighters. Some of them included Ali and Frazier's face-off when they first met, Rocky Marciano and Jersey Joe Wolcott, Oscar De La Hoya and Trinidad when they first met and were both undefeated, Thomas Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard, and Mike Tyson. Although, when I painted them back then, I had no idea how special later on they would become. I've always been aggressive when it comes to sharing my art and putting myself where I need to be to get things accomplished, and it's proven to be very productive. When Oscar De La Hoya and Trinidad were fighting for the first time for the title, I went to the press conference with this 24-inch by 30-inch portrait and waited for 2 hours to catch a chance to see them. Sure enough, Oscar came parading down the hall to the weigh-in with 8 security guards around him. I stepped out in front of them and walked along showing my painting and asked Oscar if he would sign my art. They didn't want to let him stop, but when he saw how awesome the piece was and the fact that it was hand-painted, he stopped and took the paint pen from my hand and autographed the piece. He shook my hand and said, "Good work." I smiled and said thanks and stepped out of the way. One day I had heard about the Golden Gloves gym owned by a sweet lady named Faye. I stopped in on a Saturday morning and had a wonderful chat with her. She shared how her and her husband started the gym almost 40 years ago. She also said that Mike Tyson helped to support the gym and used it to train when he was in town. There was a picture on the wall he had given her of him, and she let me take it to paint a portrait. When I was finished, I brought it into the gym and she was thrilled. One day I got a call from her, said Mike was going to be at the gym that afternoon to train if I wanted to come by with the picture. That day I had a portrait of Marilyn Monroe in the car also. I took both portraits in to share with everyone. Tyson liked them both. Months later I stopped in to say hello in the afternoon. The guy running the place said that she had been sick and died a couple of days earlier. He gave me her daughter's phone number and said to call her. Her daughter requested that I paint a portrait for them to display at the funeral because it was going to be a closed casket. They had very few good pictures of her to show. That was special for me because I had gotten to know her heart within those few times we visited. At the wake, her smile beamed brightly from the portrait painted with love for one of this world's special people. She gave so much time and effort to make that gym the best it could be for the kids. Gave a lot of underprivileged kids hopes and a dream for a future. For the past 5 years, Kendall Tenney of one of the local TV stations here in Vegas held a 10K race to raise money for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. This is the special piece I created and donated to be auctioned off to help raise money for the kids. Earlier that summer, another guy in Vegas at Johnny Taco Gym commissioned me to do a large portrait of Thomas Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard. It measured 4 foot by 6 foot and was a reflection of when they first faced off. Louis, the owner, liked it so much, he had me paint a portrait of a well-known trainer and close friend of his, Andy Scrivani. He was thrilled when I delivered it. Each piece created always has a special sentimental value to both the giver and the receiver. Absolute Boxing Gym presented me with a once-in-a-lifetime chance to share the spotlight with the greatest boxer of all times, Muhammad Ali. His daughter Layla, who also boxes, is the owner of the gym. Her and her husband were to have their grand opening and commissioned me to create a 10-foot-tall, lifelike portrait on canvas that would stand boldly behind their boxing ring. Muhammad Ali was there to congratulate them and cut the ribbon for their opening ceremony. All the media were there for this historical event. As I sat in awe next to the greatest fighter of all times, he performed a little magic trick, making a hanky disappear in his hand, seemingly uncaring of the speech being recited next to us. After the ribbon cutting, he autographed for me the portrait I painted of him and Joe Frazier that reflected the first time they faced off. It's sad to see him having so much difficulty walking and speaking, but when he actually got the pen to the canvas, he signed his autograph with precision and confidence. I shook his hand and told him I was honored to have had the opportunity to share this special event with him and his daughter Layla. I could see in his eyes the happiness in his heart. Boxing was always a passion for me. I remember back in high school, on this one particular Friday night, I had gone to my cousin Jim's girlfriend's school to watch her brother compete against one of the state's best boxing teams. As I sat next to Roxanne in the stands, I told her how I had always wanted to box myself. When I said that, she jumped up and said, "I'll be right back." About 10 minutes later, she came running back and grabbed my arm, telling me to follow her to the locker room. Apparently, the other school showed up one boxer short, so her school had no one to match up to their star boxer. She had told the coach I could box, and he wanted to see my skills, so I moved and jabbed a little, and he said I could fight if I wanted to. Sure, why not? Even though I had never been in the ring before. Well, I went 3 hard rounds and surprised them all, losing only by a split decision from the judges. I never did fight again in the ring, but that was my 9 minutes of fame as a boxer. Little did I know then that the future would bring me face to face with some of the greatest in the sport and have my art signed by them. My friend Rhonda was there at Ollie's gym with me and took these photos of history in the making. Sugar Ray Leonard is a promoter now in Vegas. I heard he was putting a show together at the Stardust and attended the event. He is so cool. We chatted for a little bit about my art, and he signed the piece I brought of him and Hearns together, and we took pictures. 3 times he brought people over to show them the art I had done. I was always very impressed with his boxing, but his character is equally impressive. Auto racing has always been my true passion. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to race, and I still do. In the early 70s was the first time I met Richard Petty at a half-mile oval called Catamount Stadium in Milton, Vermont. He was there to meet and greet the fans. I worked my way down through the crowd and got close enough to shake his hand and even got a kiss from his wife. How ironic that 30 years later, when his grandson Adam Petty got killed in a practice run, I would come face to face with the king of NASCAR again. After the tragedy, the local Las Vegas Journal published a picture of the 4 generations of the Petty racing family. Using that picture as a reference, I painted an awesome 16 by 20 portrait on canvas and wrote to the king telling him how we had met 30 years earlier and how much I appreciated how much time and effort they take to meet the fans. I told him I would love to give him and his family this piece of art. He flew into the Vegas VIP airport to meet me and accept the masterpiece graciously with tears in his eyes. 2 weeks later, he sent me a hardcover book of his racing career that he signed the inside of the cover and this thank you card saying how much they adored the art and that it had been framed and was hanging in the Petty Museum in North Carolina. Since then, I've met Richard and Kyle 4 other times and they signed my art with much appreciation. A second time I was blessed with a truly once-in-a-lifetime experience. It was at the grand opening of the NASCAR Cafe at the Sahara Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. There was a huge VIP party planned for the press and special invited guests prior to the general public being able to enter. Because of the contacts I had made, I was in the place before anybody had arrived. As I sat back of the cafe waiting, I had no idea what was about to happen. I looked up and Dale Earnhardt Sr. came walking through the cafe with the head of security along his side. Earlier that evening, at the last minute, I had decided to bring along the Earnhardt portrait, and all of a sudden there he was coming toward me. I stood up and walked to meet him. As I reached him, I held up the piece of art and said, "Mr. Earnhardt, I hand-painted this. Would you sign it for me?" He looked at me with a very stern face and said, "You painted that?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did. That's my signature right there." He took the paint pen out of my hand, signed his name, and put out his hand to shake mine and said, "Good job." I thanked him, and as they walked off, the security guard gave me a look as if to say, "Who the hell are you and how did you get in here?" I could hardly believe it actually happened. Later that evening, when the VIP party was in process, Kyle Petty came through and he autographed the one I did of him and his dad Richard. A few months later, Richard and Kyle attended a signing at the Sam Towns 400. I stood in line waiting my turn to see them for an autograph. When I walked up to the two of them, Kyle said he remembered seeing the piece at the NASCAR Cafe. I asked him if I could take a picture of him holding the piece. Then Richard signed it, and when I asked to take a photo with him, he insisted I get in the picture with him. How cool was that? The third time I met was a magical day. It was early in the afternoon, but the Las Vegas Speedway was excitingly crowded. The race was a couple of hours away from starting. I had brought the Dale Earnhardt autograph piece and the one of him and Junior together. Also, I was carrying the Richard Petty portrait. Walking around the racing memorabilia trailers seemed to upset some of the salespeople because my art drew too much attention away from the fans buying from them. I signed my name on the Dale Earnhardt trailer, and I decided to head up to the suites that overlooked the track. This is where all the VIP and race teams and sponsors' families hang out to watch the race. They weren't open to the general public, but carrying my art seemed to open doors, and they welcomed me in to share my work. I found myself in the Busch Budweiser suite. They said that Dale Jr. had just left 15 minutes earlier. Timing is everything. The buffet that's prepared for these VIP are awesome. They invited me to hang out and watch the race. After about 45 minutes, I was restless and thanked them for the hospitality and headed for my vehicle to see if I could get in the infield. As I pulled up to the security guard to go through the tunnel that led to the team's garage and motorhomes, she seemed to recognize me and waved me through. Cruising into the infield is so cool. I parked just inside the garage area and grabbed my art. Within a short while, I had found my way to the top of the media building that overlooked all the teams on pit road. The race had about 80 laps before the checkered flag would drop. As I hung out watching the teams before their incredible pit stops, lots of people commented about my art. There was only 15 laps to go, and I was right behind Kyle Petty's team when I noticed Richard Petty heading towards his son's team. My heart pounded thinking about how I might get down there to show Richard this new piece I had created of him. As he left the area, I watched him disappear among the crowd. It looked like Richard had headed towards the team motorhome area, so that's where my feet brought me. Usually that area is off limits to everyone except the owners. As I walked up to the gate, carrying these 3 portraits, the 2 security guards stepped aside and opened the gates to let me in. Now I had no passes hanging around my neck like everyone else in that area. I was pretty amazed and walked through like I knew where I was going. Once inside the gate, I asked this guy standing next to Dale Jr.'s trailer where Richard Petty was. He pointed across the way about 6 trailers down. I walked up to this incredible home on wheels and the door was open. I stuck my head in and could see Richard sitting inside. I stepped up the first step and said, "Mr. Petty?" He said, "Yes." I said, "It's Robert Shappy, the artist that painted the 4 generations for you." He said, "Oh, hello, Robert. Come on in." He is so cool. He signed my art and we took pictures of us together and spent a short time chatting about the museum where they had hung the 4 generations piece. I said goodbye and thanked him for the hospitality. He said, "Come by anytime." When I left there and walked towards the gate, I could see a crowd of people coming through the garage area. They were surrounding Dale Jr. to get interviews and signatures. I waited until he entered the owner's area and asked him to sign the piece I had done of him and his dad. Then I took a picture of him holding it. That made a perfect ending to a hard day work. 2 of the greatest racers ever signing my art for me. My brother Dana is a big NASCAR fan also. He recently attended a race in Loudon, New Hampshire. He had his picture taken with the Winston girl and his favorite driver, Dale Earnhardt Sr. Another time, Bobby Labonte attended a signing at the Sahara also. After he autographed my art, he wanted to take a picture of him holding the Earnhardt piece because they were friends. As I started to walk away, the security guard grabbed me by the arm and said, "You don't know me, do you?" I said, "No, why, should I?" He told me that he was standing next to Dale Earnhardt Sr. when he autographed that piece for me, and he offered to sign a certificate of authenticity witnessing the signing. That was so cool. Rusty Wallace also came to the Sahara another time and signed my portrait of him. He wanted me to take a picture of him holding the Earnhardt piece because they were friends. After Dale Earnhardt Sr. died at the Daytona 500, the NASCAR Cafe took one of his cars and made a shrine in the gift shop. I had created a 4-foot by 6-foot portrait commemorating the man in black, and it now hangs in the NASCAR Cafe above his car for the world to view. They also recently set an additional area aside for Dale Earnhardt Sr., and this motorcycle tank I painted is now alongside his racing outfit in the memorabilia case. My brother Danny and I have always had a great relationship. On my trip home this past summer of 2004, we went skydiving together. What a rush that was. We jumped from 11,000 feet above Addison County, Vermont. The view was spectacular, overlooking Lake Champlain and the Adirondack Mountains. Here are a couple pictures of that great adventure we shared together. Hello, my name is Robert Emerald Shappy, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about how the Elvis-orama Museum and my book, Elvis Art Through Emerald's Eyes, came about. Well, it all started actually on one Thursday morning. I met this gentleman at a business mixer, and his name was Mike, and he was telling me how he had met this client that was had an idea of creating an Elvis Presley museum, and he had been collecting Elvis art for about 8 years, and he had enough to fill this place. So I told him about my creativity and showed him some of the photos of my work, and he said, Robert, you need to get together with this guy and see how you can work with him to help create this place. So for about a week I tried calling the owner of the museum and never got any answer. So persistent as I was, I continued to call, and the next week he actually called me back. And when I talked to him on the phone, he said, Robert, he said, I'm sorry, but I already have an artist that's going to create artwork for my museum. I don't really need your help. And I told him, I said, Chris, it doesn't hurt to have options. Maybe we should get together. Let me share my creativity, show you some of my ideas and my photos, and go from there. So we met, and we spent actually about 20 minutes into the conversation. He said, Robert, he goes, I absolutely love your creativity, your imagination. He goes, your work is fabulous. I want you to be the in-house artist for this great project. So I was like, great, that's wonderful. So we spent about 4 hours going through pictures, looking at Elvis photos that he had collected to see how we could arrange them all in a chronological order to create this museum to go along with all the memorabilia that he had gathered over the years. So it was a wonderful project, and the rest is history. After 3 years of continuing to collect Elvis's belongings, the owner decided to create a second Elvis museum in Laughlin, Nevada. Being an hour and a half from Vegas made it rather inconvenient to travel every day, so I relocated for a little over 5 months to the Edgewater Hotel and Casino, where the museum was being built. Here, I'm wearing one of Elvis's jackets that he wore in the movie It Happened at the World's Fair in 1963. I really enjoyed being on the Colorado River while it was so hot. The cold water seemed to cool the air some. I met some interesting people while creating those murals. Mark was the Elvis impersonator that ran the blackjack tournaments. We played golf together a few times, and that was a treat for me because I had not played once in the previous 4 years of being in Las Vegas. He had me paint a portrait of him to use for a CD cover. During Mother's Day weekend, my friend Rhonda and her 11-year-old son Anthony came down to Laughlin to visit me and see the museum. We rented jet skis and rode up and down the river for an hour. I always loved the water. It made me miss Lake Champlain and living close to the river. I created a portrait of her and gave it to her at Christmas. Germany's Star Search winners visited the Elvis Museum, and I presented the singer who had requested the Elvis tour this original portrait. He was thrilled. Before I had ever met the owner of the museum, the only portrait I had ever done of Elvis was this piece similar to the postage stamp that had come out a few years ago. Now I'm sure I have created the largest collection of Elvis art from any one artist in the world. In March of 2002, the Frontier Hotel and Casino held one of the biggest Elvis impersonator contests ever. Elvis's backup singers, the Jordanaires, were there to meet the fans and to present the winner with his award. I also gave the winner a special lithograph of a hand-painted portrait of the king that was signed by myself and the Jordanaires. Here we are together at the signing. Elvis's first cousin, Donna Presley, was also present for this historical event. She gave me one of her books and signed the inside of the cover. Mr. Las Vegas himself, Wayne Newton, autographed this portrait for me just prior to one of his shows. Frank Marino stars in one of the largest productions on the Strip called La Cage, where he impersonates Joan Rivers. All the other cast members are also men that impersonate female stars, and they are fantastic. Frank absolutely loved my art and signed both pieces, and we took great photos of him in and out of costume holding the art. It's the summer of 2003 now, and the heat has been intense all across the country. I returned home to Burlington, Vermont for a week in July to visit family and friends. What timing, too. The temperature got up to 117 degrees in Vegas. Burlington was a comfortable 80 degrees. I spent some quality time with my parents and with my brother Dana and sister-in-law Karen and two nieces Sarah and Shauna. We went out on their boat in the Mallets Bay and tubed and water skied for the afternoon. What a blast that was. One particular morning comes to mind. I was driving from the Elvis Museum and a pink Cadillac pulls up beside my 85 Olds, and an Elvis impersonator rolls down his window and asks me who did the art on my car. When I told him it was my work, his eyes lit up and he asked if I would pull over so he could get a better look. Coincidentally, I had gotten a lead about someone looking for a mural artist to create some themed rooms. That's where this guy worked, and he mentioned his boss had an idea to do these themed rooms and that I should give him a call. Well, I had already left a message at that number, but hadn't got a response yet. Sure enough, the next day, Ron gave me a call from the Viva Las Vegas themed wedding chapel and villas. He suggested we meet and share some ideas about doing these themed rooms in his establishment. Ron is well known for his Elvis weddings. The Travel Channel featured him a few times as one of Vegas's top places to get married by the king. One of his ideas included creating an Elvis and Priscilla suite for his newlyweds to enjoy after they got married by the king himself. My imagination and three-dimensional creativity was just what he was looking for to bring this all to life. He had gutted two rooms to combine them as one suite with his and her bathrooms and a hot tub. I made the bedroom look as if you were outside the gates of Graceland, and the bed was created from the front of a '54 pink Cadillac. When in the bed, you get the feeling you're driving out the gates and through a garden with the horses and stables off to your left. The hot tub room looks like a recording studio, complete with Elvis life-size playing and singing. It's now one of their most popular rooms. I've shown the pictures a few times and clients say they have seen it on the Travel Channel. The Elvis Blue Hawaii room is awesome also. My part in that room included making Elvis and the girls on the beach look realistic and adding touches to the trees and clouds to give them motion. Here's the owner Ron proudly posing near Elvis in this wonderful tropical scene. A photo of the Blue Hawaii room was used for the marquee in front of the main entrance. The Camelot room is one of my favorites. This room includes a knight on his horse, a dragon protecting his cave, a castle with the bed as a drawbridge. The TV and VCR is hidden in an old oak tree built from real bark. There is also a suit of armor. The carpet also resembles a moat, grass, and a road that leads to the castle. You can hardly recognize the doors as they blend into the landscaping. The blinds are painted to look like a lake with 13th century ships. The tub gives you the feel of standing under a waterfall pouring from a stone ledge. My final touch to this whole project was to paint the whole outside of the chapel and motel to look like stone, resembling a 13th century castle. This landmark has gone through some remarkable changes since I arrived here in July of 1998, and hopefully will endure the test of time and ever-changing surroundings. Being that this city is one of the fastest growing in the country, you never know what will pop up next or what might be replaced by a new and improved building. It's an amazing thing to see when they deplot a major structure such as a hotel or casino. I had just arrived before they took down the Sands Hotel. Recently they deploted the Desert Inn. When 9/11 occurred and the towers collapsed, it enlightened us all how vulnerable our buildings really are. This is a piece I created reflecting the passion, emotion, love, spirit, and strength we share as a country. I'm in process of superimposing all the names of those who perished that day and donating the arch charity that helped the surviving family members to move forward with hope. This VW was created also to show our patriotism and spirit as a strong nation and was displayed on the Las Vegas Strip that whole following year. Many tourists took photos standing in front of it. One of the latest projects really made a nice change to the Little Darlings Gentlemen Club in Las Vegas. They had planned to renovate that location just before I met the general manager. The old VIP room was just a black hole in the wall. Well, a big hole because it measured 13 foot by 40 foot long. The idea was to make it a Roman theme. It now includes pillars with vines entwined around them, three-dimensional murals of girls in garden scenes, working fountains and waterscapes, plush Roman-style drapes with shears, faux walls and ceilings, candlelight lamps and burning fire canters illuminate a soft glow to the room and completes the atmosphere perfectly. Thanks to my close friend Janeth, who helped create the awesome drapes and shears. This is Janeth with her 3 wonderful dogs, Pebbles, Puppet, and Molly, my friends. Here, Puppet and I are relaxing after a hard jam session and a long walk around the park. The guitar is a piece I painted leopards on for display in my gallery back in Vermont. It's 2008. It's a beautiful day in Las Vegas. The 4th annual Beatles Festival is going on for 4 days at the Mirage Hotel and Casino. My space is designed very versatile with many of my original masterpieces on display, including this one I entered in the art contest. Altogether there were 60 entries. Mine was awarded first place and this blue ribbon. I love the Beatles music, and it was very satisfying painting this one of their album cover. About an hour into the first day of the festival, a lovely lady strolled down the aisle, gazing in my direction. I couldn't help noticing her beautiful smile and amazing energy. As I walked out into the aisle to greet her, I felt compelled to give her a hug. That embrace sent electricity through my body, and we shared a special connection. She spent those 4 days accompanying me during the festival. She had made a special trip to come from Hawaii to attend her 2nd annual event. For the next 3 months, we were connected via phone every day. Then she asked if I would consider moving to Hawaii to live with her. After spending 10 years in Las Vegas, building a reputation and clients both business and personal, it wasn't easy to just leave it all behind. But I had fallen in love with her and was willing to start a new life in hopes of a forever after. Honolulu, here I come. It was starting over as I had done in 1998 when I left Vermont. Unfortunately, the relationship I moved here to be in had irreconcilable differences and ended with this artist having a broken heart. That emotional pain lasted longer than I had hoped to endure. True love is very deep, but time and acceptance of the things we cannot change allows us to move forward in a positive way. Perhaps a little more cautious and unwilling to open up our heart so freely. So a year has passed, and fate brought an angel into my world. As I walked along Waikiki Beach, I was drawn to an angel sitting on a bench, and she appeared to be very sad and alone. I stood next to her for a moment with a desire to say hello. She turned to me, and her frown became a beautiful smile. In that moment in time, my heart filled with warmth and love. I knew from that moment on, she was an angel from heaven that was looking for me. All that afternoon and evening, we shared our thoughts and dreams of life and love until I saw her off at midnight at the airport. For 3 weeks, I sent her pictures and wonderful thoughts of our magical afternoon and evening together. The first response I got back was an email telling me she has planned a trip back to Honolulu because she has realized she had fallen in love with me also. After a week of us sharing the beauty and romance of Hawaii together, I asked her to marry me. 3 months later on Valentine's Day, we married on Kailua Beach at sunrise. Dreams do come true. As a kid, I always had dreams of flying. At the age of 50, my dad earned his pilot's certificate. In 2014, I earned my private glider pilot certificate. It's so majestic flying over the north shore of Oahu, free as a bird to soar in the airways of the Pacific Ocean. It brings back nice memories when my dad took up Ben and I, and we flew over Lake Champlain in Vermont. The next part of that wonderful dream includes owning a 4-seat motor glider to cruise the Hawaiian Islands whenever my heart desires. If you believe in yourself, anything is possible. There are many awesome artistic creations that I was blessed to be able to do in Hawaii these past 9 years. I always enjoyed the ones that enhance children's lives the most. Dr. Joseph Brewitt owns Upper Cervical in Honolulu and commissioned me to create a fun atmosphere in the kids' lounge area in his office. The lawyer's office across the hall saw his mural and had me create this one for her office. Howie Mandel was scheduled to do a one-night appearance here in Honolulu for a stand-up comedy show. That evening, about an hour before the show was to begin, I met with his manager and showed him this portrait I created of Howie reflecting the Deal or No Deal show he hosted. He went to Howie and showed him the painting. I was invited down to the green room to meet him before the show. We spent about 25 minutes talking about my art and how he appreciated what I had done. I gave him this portrait and he said how great it would look hanging in his home office. As we were leaving him, an earthquake happened and the lights were out all over the city. Howie ended up canceling the show and flew out the next morning. Schofield Army Base on Oahu now has one of the largest murals I've created throughout my 28 years as a professional artist. Master Sergeant Marcelli commissioned me to create an armed force mural with a Hawaii theme in their new dining facility. This 120-foot acrylic on canvas painting included each branch of the military and was mounted above their buffet line. He was thrilled that I put him in the mural as a diver chef. Because this mural was so popular with all the soldiers, I was commissioned to do another military mural for Wheeler Army Base. The 25th Combat Brigade had me create a 36-foot mural in their dining facility representing all the support units that occupied the base. Thanks to Sergeant Hall for his support in getting this project approved and completed. Just down the road from the Army base is a well-known business called Select Auto Group. Many of the military come to them looking for reliable vehicles to buy. Ray, the owner, wanted to reflect his patriotism in the appearance of his establishment. So I created these murals for the outside of his building. No question, he is a proud American. Hawaii has a dramatic history of great loss and devastation over the past century. Pearl Harbor and the Arizona are one of those engraved in our memories and hearts. Restaurant 604 has a mural I created dedicated to the men in their ship that were lost that day in 1941. It's priceless when you can change someone's home or business with your art so dramatically that it touches their heart in a very sentimental way. Brian from Elite Massage Academy is one of those special people.
Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Brian Matsudo, owner of Elite Massage Academy, and we're here now at the new location, which is 1130 North Nimitz Highway. It was a build out because the old location was at Ward Warehouse, and I think you know it got torn down. So here we are, and we're featuring this wall, this beautiful art done by Robert Emerald Shappy. Beautiful, wonderful artist that gave me more than I imagined. In the build-out, I was stuck with a wall that was 22 foot long, 9 foot high, drywall. And I knew that it really divided the space. I needed to build a lot of depth and bring a feeling that promotes that wellness. So I was very fortunate to come across Robert, and I'm more than happy with all of this artwork. In the process, he got started and showed me the initial start, and I kind of interrupted him and just asked that he could add some of my logos. So my first logo was a rainbow with two hands embracing it. That was the first Elite Massage Academy logo, and now it's the watermark. It's the ripple effect. Okay, so I just asked him to add those two logos within this mural that he created, and lo and behold, when I received this, it was more than, I think, destiny. This really resembles my path to where I am now. It was the creation of the academy, and through all of his mural displays all of my waterfalls and things that I had to get over and overcome to this point here. So I can't tell you how touched I was by him really getting that on the money. Okay, so here he is.
Hey Brian, thank you. It's been a pleasure absolutely working with you. This is a great place that you're building here, and you guys got great energy here, and it's just awesome. And for me to be able to create something that makes you feel so good about how your life has come about and to this point it's an honor for me.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yes, it's amazing. You must see his artwork in person. He's a very professional artist. He gave me a lot of time. He showed me his previous artwork from which I could choose from, and thus we got exactly what I asked for, and then some. So this is very beautiful to see in person. Like he told me, videos and photos does not do this justice, and he was absolutely correct. He also came in and enhanced it by putting in these little plants and to give it a 3D effect, and it's just amazing. Now you're viewing it under a light that usually isn't viewed with artwork, as I'm told by the professional. So we are setting up a track lighting that will very much make all of these colors come much more alive.
Awesome.
Robert,
Yes.
what from the initial contract to the completion, how long did that take?
Well, I knew Brian, we had a deadline because he wanted to get open, he kind of got me at almost like the last minute type thing, and I'm like, okay dude, I'm going to commit to you. So I spent 12 days, 10 to 14 hours a day creating this so I could have it ready for him before his deadline.
Mm-hmm.
When you're creating something like this, do you have the complete vision before you begin, or does it evolve like a song?
After talking with him, I had showed him some different reference pictures of things that I had created before, and he liked certain aspects of that. So I made notes of what he liked, and I thought, okay, so now as I take those notes down, I think about the overall thing, because we had 22 feet to work with here, where those were individual pieces. So I had to kind of place those together. So in my mind, usually I do have an vision, but as I go, things come about. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well I'm going to put this thing going this way, and so it develops. Each piece of artwork develops as you go along with it. Max at Lucky Owl Car Rental has artists in his family history. He appreciates some of the master's work. He contracted me to recreate Salvador Dali's work in his Hawaii business location. This is one of the most unique restrooms you will ever find. When you work as an artist and owner of your own business, it gives you the option to schedule your time when and where you desire. This is my office and studio for this particular day in paradise. This backyard fence was turned into a wonderful garden scene for a very special lady that spent much of her last months here enjoying and feeling nature all around her. Then I created another garden scene to enhance the garage entrance to their lovely home. We all lose someone we love dearly, and it breaks our hearts, whether it's in a relationship or they go to heaven. But as time heals the pain, we can look back and remember the wonderful things about them that made us smile. It's an honor to have been chosen to reflect their character and soul in a painting I have created for the ones left behind. There have been a few portraits painted throughout the years in remembrance of someone's passing, and also a few that have passed since I created art for them. Each piece of art will be around long after I am gone. For an artist who has been blessed to be able to touch so many hearts with my work, that's a wonderful thought. Napua Wong was the owner and curator of Paradise Park snack and gift shops in Manoa Valley. This was the start of a very special friendship and business relationship. Her creativity and desire to make her establishment pleasant and a reflection of the Hawaii culture gave me an opportunity to showcase my work in a very high traffic area. We started a series of birds that currently had habitats in the Hawaiian Islands. I dressed up her lounge area with tropical plants, birds, and other small creatures. A painting of Manoa Falls was created from a photo her husband Warren had taken. The gift shop floor I painted to resemble a brook flowing through the center of the room. It's been a wonderful pleasure knowing and working with Napua these past 9 years I have been in Honolulu. February 16, 2017 was the last time I would say goodbye to my dad. There were a few times over the past 6 years that we thought we wouldn't make it through his health issues, but something gave him the will to hold on longer. I think it was the trips my mom and him would make to the casino in New York every other week or so. Finally, the day before my birthday, he was just too tired and ready to let go. He was diagnosed with liver cancer 3 months earlier. He outlived almost all his siblings up until the age of 86. Out of 12 kids and his parents, only 2 brothers and sisters survive him. In August of 2017, I published my first book of all the Elvis art I created for 2 Elvis Presley museums mentioned earlier in my story. Traveling to Memphis for the first time was very exciting to promote my book during Elvis Week. Many of the people revolved around Elvis's life attended the celebration. Each had stories of their own to share with the thousands of visitors that came from all over the world to give tribute to the King of Rock and Roll. Many of them appreciated the work I had done to reflect Elvis's life in my art and took photos of us together with my book. I did a couple of book signings near Graceland. The new bookstore named Novel bought my books to showcase in their new store in Memphis. Bookends in Kailua now has my book, Elvis Art Through Emerald's Eyes, available on their shelves. Lori, the publisher of Hawaii Wellness Magazine, gave me the privilege of having my art on the cover 2 different years since I've lived here in Hawaii. One of my favorite places to go out and dance was Jimmy Buffett's. Every Friday and Saturday night, they would have some great bands playing a variety of dance music. I met the management and they asked if I could create some murals for the outside of the main bar and dining room. Also, they wanted to change the look of the front of the building on the lower main level to the street. I created 2 murals on the upper level and this design to enhance the front lower level. I received a call one morning from a very nice lady named Trini. Her and her husband owned a bed and breakfast in Kaneohe, Hawaii, and wanted to create a mural on the wall that faced the entrance. This wall was 11 foot tall and 50 foot long. We have in our lifetime so many wonderful memories and highlights to reflect back on. There are also those things we cannot turn the time back on to change as much as we wish we could. In February 2016, the girl in my dreams, the angel on the bench, had to return to her home country in Germany. She asked I let her go in life and love so she could deal with the issues that burdened her for many years before we met. My vows to her when we married was to always put her feelings and well-being first as long as I shall live. A man of my word, I granted her the request she made of me. My heart was broken, as I believed we would live happily ever after and grow old together as husband and wife, soulmates. That time in my life was the hardest I had ever experienced to survive. My dreams and hopes now were gone. I couldn't understand why I deserved to lose everything I had waited for all my life and had no way to change the outcome. It was a fairy tale that had come to a sudden end. So now I move forward each day with a new hope that the saying, if you love something and set it free, it will come back to you if it was meant to be, is also part of our destiny. Putting my passion to each creation I make for my clients keeps me inspired to look for the next way I can enhance someone else's life with my art. That's what's kept me going all these years, even when financial burdens tried to pressure me to give up my professional career and take on a meaningless job working for someone else's financial gain. There is much more to success than how much money you have in your pocket. What you leave behind in the heart and souls of all you have touched in your lifetime is priceless. Thousands of my creations will be around and admired long after I've left this physical place we call Earth. Never give up your hopes and dreams. If you believe in yourself, anything is possible. Each piece of art created has a story behind the thoughts, smiles, and special meanings that brought all of them to me, creating a reflection from the passion inside of me as an artist with a dream and desire to share it all with you. I remember when 10 to 12-hour days were spent in my gallery creating more work than I thought I could keep up with. We placed an ad for an artist to help me with the overwhelming demand for custom creations. Within a week, over 200 artists had come through my doors, most just looking for some kind of outlet for their talents. I never did hire any of them, only because I needed someone as versatile as me without having to take the time to train them. And to this day, I still haven't taken on help, yet I feel I've achieved so much. The point is, if you truly believe in yourself, nothing is impossible to achieve. If your dream is big enough, it will always stay in your sight, no matter how many obstacles may seem to block its view. Let the happiness you see in others as they appreciate what you have created be your inspiration to create another. That will help your life, love, and passion move forward in a positive way, as it has for me. I hope you have enjoyed these special moments and my artistic impressions as much as I have sharing them with you. Each day brings another beautiful picture in our mind's eye that touches our hearts. I look forward to sharing mine with you in my next adventure through Emerald's eyes. My dad playing the piano, September 11th, 2011. Give us that smile one time, Dad. Good job, Dad. What's one of your favorites?
I got a lot. Hey, Robert, wake up. It's over. Show's over.
Wow. That was fast.
Yeah, it always is.
Where did everybody go?
Well, they took off.
Why didn't they say goodbye?
Well, they didn't want to wake you up.
What did I miss?
Just the best part. The best part.
Want to watch it? You want to watch it again?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.